The scent of wood polish clung to my skin like a second layer as I rubbed small circles into the long walnut table. The room was so quiet that the fabric's friction became its only heartbeat, mingling with the soft patter of rain against the tall windows. Pale light filtered through the glass, painting the air of Devlin Manor in shades of gray. The table stretched almost 30 feet, long enough to host 20 guests, but in my 3 months here, I'd never seen anyone sit at it. Only dust, silence, and the occasional footsteps of security patrolling the marble corridors. I wasn't supposed to be here. The main dining room was Mrs. Crane's domain, but she had fallen ill, and I'd been reassigned. 3 months working in this labyrinth of wealth and secrets, and there were still wings I hadn't entered. The thought made me shiver, despite the warmth. I tried to focus, but the air felt aware, as if the walls themselves were listening. "You missed a spot." "Eli." The voice came from behind me, low, calm, and commanding. My heart skipped once. I hadn't heard footsteps. I turned slowly. Dante Devlin stood at the far end of the table, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but coiled. The top button of his white shirt was undone, revealing a hint of sun-bronzed skin. His gray eyes caught the light, cold, unreadable, magnetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Devlin," I murmured. "I'll fix it right away." He didn't answer. He simply moved closer, each step deliberate, silent, predatory. The soft click of his shoes against the floor echoed like a countdown. I felt the air shift as he stopped behind me. "Look at me, Elena." His voice dropped, velvet wrapped around steel. I turned, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Up close, I noticed the faint scar slashing through his right eyebrow. It didn't mar his face. It made him look carved by conflict, a man forged rather than born. "I haven't seen you in this room before," he said. "No, sir, Mrs. Crane usually handles this area. I was asked to cover for her." Dante nodded slightly, his gaze sliding to my hands, dry cracked, marked by cleaning chemicals. 3 months here. Yes. And before that? The question tightened my chest. I'd worked in healthcare? Specifically? I was a nurse. A flicker of amusement ghosted across his lips, gone as quickly as it came. A nurse, leaving a hospital to polish my furniture. Curious career move. I dropped my eyes. I needed a change. "So did I," he said, voice roughened by something unreadable. "But few people are brave enough to follow through." Silence filled the room again, heavy, measured. His gaze lingered, not the way a man looks at a woman, but the way a strategist studies a puzzle. I gathered my supplies, ready to retreat, when his voice came once more. "Have dinner with me? Tonight, 6 o'clock. My breath caught. "Me? I'm just—" "Not a request." His tone didn't rise, but it left no room for argument. "I wish to speak with you, and I don't repeat myself." I froze, gripping the cloth until my knuckles whitened. Outside, rain began to fall harder, tapping against the windows in sync with my racing pulse. As Dante Devlin turned and walked away, his shadow stretched across the polished floor, long, solitary, and inescapable. I stood still, unsure which frightened me more, the silence of this house or the attention of the man who ruled it. The door closed behind him, sealing the silence in thick air. Rain still fell outside, merging with my uneven breathing. From that moment, I knew life inside Devlin Manor would never be quiet again. By morning, after a night that refused to end inside my head, the red-carpeted corridor outside his office was empty. I walked past, pretending not to glance at the dark oak door spilling a faint line of light. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, as if those gray eyes trailed behind every step I took. All day I couldn't focus. "Have dinner with me." His words echoed in my skull, slow, metallic, impossible to ignore. I didn't know if I was afraid or curious. At 6, I stood before the mirror in my small staff room, hands trembling slightly as I adjusted my collar. I chose a simple cream dress, the only thing that made me feel human rather than hidden. The warm lamplight revealed a tired face, eyes that didn't quite belong in this world. I swallowed my fear and left. The private dining room greeted me with a low creak and a wave of scent, smoke, oak, and wine. Dante Devlin sat at the head of the table, perfectly still, perfectly dressed. He looked up as I entered, not smiling, just a single nod that felt like command. "I'm not used to being looked at like that," I whispered. "Then get used to it," he said evenly. "Sit," I obeyed. The wine in his glass glowed darkly beneath the light, like liquid fire. "You've worked here 3 months," he said. "That interests me." I said nothing. "You don't belong among mops and dust, Elena." "I just needed a job," I said softly. "You were a nurse." I froze. "You know?" "I know more than you think." He set his glass down, tilting his head. "You left the hospital, disappeared from the registry, changed your name, and now here you are, in my house." I felt stripped bare, exposed. "I haven't hurt anyone," I whispered. "I just want peace." "Peace," he repeated, with a ghost of a smile. "You chose the wrong place." Before I could answer, the door swung open. A man in a navy suit walked in, holding a half-empty glass of wine. Marcus Lang, one of Dante's business partners. "Dante," he said cheerfully, his voice soaked in alcohol. "Didn't know you had such lovely company." I flinched as he came closer, grinning. "And who might this be? New hire?" "Mr. Lang," Dante said quietly. "This is a private dinner." Marcus ignored him, stepping near enough that I could smell the wine on his breath. His fingers brushed a strand of my hair. "Beautiful. You've got excellent taste, my friend." I didn't even have time to move before the chair at the head of the table scraped back sharply. Dante rose, deliberate and calm, like a tide pulling back before it breaks. "Remove your hand," Marcus chuckled, nervous. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I was only—" The look in Dante's eyes silenced him. It wasn't anger, it was precision, cold and absolute. "Lucian," Dante said. He didn't have to raise his voice. The tall man in black appeared at the doorway, silent as a shadow. "See Mr. Lang out." Marcus blanched. "Come on, Dante, no need—" "Out!" The single word carried the weight of final judgment. Lucian's hand landed on Marcus's shoulder, guiding him firmly toward the door. When it shut, the fire crackled, filling the silence. "No one touches you in this house," Dante said without turning. "No one." I stood frozen, half gratitude, half fear. That voice didn't sound like protection. It sounded like possession. He turned, the edge in his eyes softening just slightly. "Eat," he murmured. "The food's getting cold." I sat, trying to steady my hands. In the flickering light, his face was half gold, half shadow, savior and predator at once. And as he lifted his glass, the wine reflected crimson in his eyes. That was when I understood I had stepped into a hunter's domain, and his gaze was a snare I might never escape. The fire in the hearth had dimmed, leaving only embers flickering, like dying stars across the polished table. I thought the night would end after Marcus was thrown out. But Dante remained seated, silently turning his glass between long fingers. He didn't look at me, yet the silence itself pressed tight, pulling the air from the room. I wasn't sure whether to leave or stay. Then the soft clink of crystal against wood broke the stillness. "Are you afraid of me, Elena?" His voice was low, husky, not angry, just testing. No, I lied, poorly. A faint smile curved his mouth. "Liars breathe deeper than usual. You just did." My fingers clenched in my lap. I didn't answer. "I want to understand," he said, leaning forward. "Why you're here, a nurse, educated, skilled, choosing to scrub my floors. Why?" "I needed to hide," I blurted out before I could stop myself. His eyes darkened. "From whom?" Silence. He studied me for a long moment, gaze unwavering, sharp as a scalpel. "I know his name," he said at last. "Grant Hale." The world seemed to shatter inside me. "You, how?" "I don't guess," he replied. "I investigate. He's a surgeon, your ex-husband, abusive." The case was buried, but not erased. I'm right, aren't I? My throat closed. Each word struck like a blade, reopening an old wound. "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't hire people I don't understand." He leaned back, eyes cold as winter steel. "And because I needed to know if what I'm protecting is worth protecting." "I don't need protection," I whispered. "Really?" His tone softened to something dangerously quiet. "What about your son, Noah? You think Hale will stop?" My head snapped up, breath caught. "Don't say his name." "See?" Dante's voice sharpened. "Even the sound of it makes you shake. He's made you live like a ghost, Elena." Tears burned behind my eyes, but he didn't relent. "I can stop him," he said. "How?" "By making him powerless, not with laws, those he can buy, with something stronger, power." He paused, gaze unwavering. "If you stand beside me." "I don't understand." He rose, moving around the table until he stood behind me. His voice dropped near my ear. "I need someone to play a role, a fiancé, a public relationship, documented, photographed, believable. You'll be that woman." I turned, shocked. "You mean pretend?" "Not exactly. You and your son will live here, under my name. The world will think you're mine. And Hale, he won't dare touch you again." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one I trust to make it real." His eyes glinted with something unreadable, part strategy, part sincerity. The room fell silent. Part of me wanted to run. The other part felt, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message, no name, just words that turned my veins to ice. "I know where you are." My hand trembled. The phone slipped, clattering against the floor. Dante picked it up, read the screen, then met my gaze. The distance between us evaporated, replaced by something cold and final. "Decide," he said softly. "Keep running or make him disappear, for good." My throat ached. "If I agree." "Then you're no longer a maid," he said, each word deliberate, like the strike of a gavel. "You belong to me." I closed my eyes, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Between fear and desperation, the word escaped me, barely audible. "Okay." When I opened my eyes, Dante was still there, the faintest trace of triumph flickering behind restraint. He handed the phone back. "From this moment, he'll never find you again." The firelight flared, reflecting crimson in his glass. I didn't know if I'd just saved myself or signed the first line of a contract with the devil. Morning came draped in fog, a pale veil covering Boston's skyline. Light seeped through tall windows, soft and colorless, washing the room in quiet silver. I woke without remembering when I'd fallen asleep. His last words still echoed inside me. From now on, you belong to me. When I sat up, I realized I wasn't in my old room. This one was 3 times the size, floors gleaming, walls lined with oil paintings, windows overlooking the east garden where sunlight fell across the maple trees. Someone had already moved my things. My worn clothes were gone, replaced by elegant dresses folded perfectly in the wardrobe. On the table sat a white envelope, my name written in strong, decisive strokes, E. Devlin. Inside was a small silver nameplate engraved simply, Elena Devlin. I stared at it as if it belonged to someone else, a new name, a new life, but not one I'd chosen. A gentle knock broke the silence. A young woman entered, blonde hair tied back neatly, eyes soft blue, voice calm as spring water. "Good morning, Ms. Elena," she said. "I'm Lydia. Mr. Devlin asked me to look after Noah when you need rest. I'll also handle your wardrobe and schedule." Her tone was kind, almost maternal. I nodded faintly. "Thank you." "The boy is with Mrs. Crane," she added. "Mr. Devlin requested extra locks and cameras installed. He doesn't want any risks." My heart twisted. Is he always like this? Careful, she hesitated, and a little excessive, but never cruel. When Lydia left, I crossed the hall into Noah's room. He was sleeping soundly, lashes long against his cheeks, lips parted in a dream. I touched his hair, whispering to myself that I'd done the right thing, even if it cost me my freedom. The door behind me opened quietly. I turned. Dante stood there, no knock, no announcement. Shirt sleeves rolled, collar undone, the morning light cutting sharp edges across his face. "He looks like you," he said softly. I didn't know what to say. "Thank you for letting us stay." "No need," he replied. "This is your home now, at least until our work is done." "Our work?" "Until everyone believes we're a couple." He stepped closer, his voice level, deliberate. "I've arranged the first photo session. The press will think we're engaged." I met his gaze. "Mr. Devlin, I'm not good at pretending." "You don't have to," he said. "Just look at me like you believe I can protect you." I let out a quiet laugh. "Can you?" He didn't smile. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." The tone wasn't gentle, it was final, and I believed him. If anyone dared to touch me, he'd erase them from the map. He moved toward the window, standing over Noah's crib. The fire in his eyes softened, flickering into something almost human. "Did you ever imagine a different life?" he asked. "Once," I said. "But fate doesn't like women like me having choices." His gaze shifted toward me, gray eyes glinting like storm water. "From now on, you'll have choices, but I write the rules." I didn't respond. His words felt both like a promise and a warning. He brushed a hand over Noah's cradle, a touch so gentle it almost wasn't real. Then he left, the door closing behind him with a muted click, leaving only the faint scent of cedar and silence. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the silver tag on the table. Elena Devlin. I didn't know who I'd become, a woman sheltered, or a bird newly caged, inside the most beautiful prison in the world. Since Dante left the room, the house had grown unnervingly quiet. I still sat by the bed, staring at the silver tag etched with Elena Devlin. The afternoon light spread across the floor like a silent breath of something I hadn't yet chosen. But fate never waits. The next day, Lydia knocked softly, holding a black velvet box. "Tonight, 8 o'clock, she said. "The charity gala at the Lexington Grand. Mr. Devlin wants you with him." My heart slowed as I opened it. Inside lay a deep blue gown, smooth as water, cold as fear. Lydia helped me into it. The fabric clung perfectly, as if tailored to my pulse. "He chose the color," she said. "He said your kind of blue shouldn't be hidden." All afternoon, the room turned into a dressing studio. The air smelled of powder and perfume. My hair was swept low, a few loose strands framing a face I barely recognized. When it was done, Lydia stepped back, smiling. "You'll make the whole room go silent." The door opened. Dante entered. Light from the hallway hit his polished shoes, reflecting the flicker from the fireplace. He stopped, watching me. The gray in his eyes had softened into something deeper, darker. "I asked Lydia to prepare everything," he said quietly. "I didn't expect this." I smiled faintly. "I'm not good at being someone else." "You don't need to be," he replied, stepping closer. "Just be you." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside, an emerald glowed, a captured forest flame. "They'll ask," he said. "You'll need this." I stared. "An engagement ring?" He nodded. "Words aren't enough. They need proof." When the ring slid onto my finger, the chill of metal sank into my skin, sealing something I couldn't name. He held my hand a second too long, eyes meeting mine, and for a heartbeat, I forgot we were pretending. "Let's go," he murmured. The Bentley moved through the city like a silent shadow. Outside, Boston shimmered, glass towers, gold lights, restless streets. My reflection in the window showed a stranger beside a man the world feared. "Do you think they'll believe it?" I asked quietly. "They'll believe what they want," Dante said, gaze fixed ahead. "And tonight they'll see a man who's found what he wants." At Lexington Grand, the noise hit first, shouting, music, camera flashes. Dante opened the door, offering his hand. It was steady, warm, faintly scented with cedar. "Smile," he whispered. "We're happy." I stepped out. The flashes exploded like fireworks, blinding. Voices rose. "Mr. Devlin, who is she? Are you engaged?" I felt like an actress thrown onto a stage without a script. Inside, chandeliers spilled light like rain. People turned as we entered, whispers curling behind us. Dante's every move was deliberate, handshakes, nods, the faint ghost of a smile. I stayed close, breathing in rhythm with him. Then I heard it, a voice that hollowed the air. "Elena?" I turned. Grant Hale stood only a few feet away. Perfect suit, polished smile, the same eyes that once made me forget how to breathe. He walked forward slowly, the light catching the glass in his hand. "You look different." I took a step back instinctively, but Dante's hand found my waist, steady, protective, claiming. "Hale," he said evenly, "don't come closer." Grant's smirk deepened. "Relax, I just wanted to say hello to my ex-wife. Surely that's allowed." The room fell silent. Conversations died. Even the music faded. Dante faced him fully, calm as ice. "She's not yours anymore," he said. Grant's smile sharpened. "Then whose is she?" Dante's lips curved, cold and exact. "Mine." He paused, turning slightly so his voice carried across the marble hall. "She's my fiancée." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, the blinding storm of flashbulbs. Grant froze, his smirk breaking under the weight of the moment. Dante's hand tightened at my waist, warm, commanding, final. In that instant, I knew nothing about this was pretend anymore. The line between act and reality had vanished, and whatever had begun as a lie had just become something far more dangerous. The air in the ballroom fractured after those words. Cameras flashed, voices rose, The world spun around us. Dante Devlin had just claimed me, and the chaos followed like fire after a spark. Grant stood frozen, the smirk slipping from his lips. His eyes darted between us, disbelief tightening his jaw. "Fiancé," he sneered. "What game are you playing, Devlin?" Dante didn't answer. "No game." "She?" Grant jabbed a finger at me. "She's my wife, ran away, hid like a criminal. You have no idea who she is." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Light hit my face, harsh and cold. I wanted to look away, but Dante's hand at my waist held me steady, firm, grounding. "Choose your words carefully, Hale," he said, each syllable sharp and deliberate. "You're standing in my house tonight." "My house?" Grant barked a laugh, ugly and loud. You think you can buy everything, even her?" The silence that followed was deadly. Dante set down his glass. The emerald on my hand caught the light, its reflection burning in his eyes. "I didn't buy her," he said quietly. "I protected her, from men like you." The whispers grew louder, turning like wind around us. Faces shifted, expressions changed. Grant's color rose, anger battled humiliation. "Protected?" he hissed. "What lies did she feed you?" Dante moved closer, calm as ice, his voice soft but cutting. "I know enough. I know you pushed her while she was pregnant. I know you crushed her wrist until she bled. I know she ran into the rain with a baby you've never seen." The room fell silent. Even the orchestra faltered, strings trembling into stillness. Grant went pale. His lips quivered, struggling for composure. "You have no proof." "I don't need proof," Dante said. "My word is enough." A deep, gravelly voice broke through from the back. "Dante." Richard Hale, Grant's father, stepped forward, gray-haired, powerful, the air around him thick with authority. "Let's not turn this gala into a spectacle. The boy made mistakes, but you'll cover them again," Dante interrupted without turning. "Like last time when you bought the hospital's silence." "I know, Richard." Gasps rippled across the hall. No one breathed. Richard's jaw tightened, rage and fear flashing through his eyes. "You're crossing a line." Dante finally turned, voice low but clear enough to cut through the air. "I don't have lines unless I draw them." He stepped closer, gaze cold as a blade. "From tonight on, Grant Hale breathes because I allow it." Silence followed, heavy, complete. Grant's chest heaved, his face flushed crimson. He looked at me one last time, hatred and fear twisted together, before he turned and stormed out. Richard followed, his shadow stiff with defeat. The music resumed, too quickly, as if to erase what had just happened. Dante looked at me, his voice softer now. "Let's go." People stepped aside as we passed. His hand rested lightly on my back, steady, unspoken authority radiating from every movement. Outside, the night wind bit against my skin, sharp and clean. My body still trembled, not from Grant, but from the man walking beside me. Dante opened the car door, helped me in. He said nothing. Streetlights streaked across his face, etching stone and shadow in equal measure. I looked down at my hand. The emerald burned green fire in the dark, reflecting the rhythm of my racing pulse. My heart still thundered, part fear, part gratitude, and something else I dared not name. The car moved through the city in silence. Streetlights slid across the glass, glinting on Dante's still face. I sat beside him, heart pounding, as if my body hadn't yet realized that the storm inside the ballroom was over. But it wasn't. It had only just begun. The next morning, Boston awoke to headlines screaming across every page. "Billionaire Dante Devlin reveals secret fiancé." Photos of us on the red carpet, his hand on my waist, the moment he claimed me, plastered everywhere. I skimmed them, a strange mixture of fear and something dangerously close to safety curling inside me. Devlin Manor was no longer quiet. Reporters gathered at the gates, staff whispered, curiosity flickered in every glance. Lydia tried to manage the chaos, but I could still feel the eyes following me through every hallway. One morning, as I made coffee, Lucian appeared at the doorway. "Mr. Devlin would like to see you in the glass room." I'd never been there before. The glass room sat at the end of the west wing. Walls of sunlight and green, air filled with orange blossom and the faint hum of morning. Dante sat by the table, white shirt, espresso steaming. "Does the press exhaust you?" he asked without looking up. "I'm not used to seeing my face in print," I said softly. "You will be." He folded the paper and met my eyes. "The world needs to believe what it sees, Elena, and I need them to believe in you." "Believe in me?" "That you're not just a woman I protect," he said, voice low. "You're the woman I chose." The words caught somewhere between my chest and breath. In the morning light, he looked almost peaceful, still carved from stone, but softened at the edges, as if the stillness itself surprised him. Days turned into a rhythm. Breakfasts with Noah, quiet afternoons, him working in the library while I read near the window, our reflections overlapping on the glass. No words needed, but something grew there, small, fragile, alive. Late one night, after Noah had fallen asleep, I found him in his office. The desk was a battlefield of papers and shadows, cigarette smoke curling in the lamplight. He looked up when I entered, a tired smile ghosting his lips. "I didn't expect you up this late," he said. "I couldn't sleep." "Nightmares?" "Not exactly," I hesitated. "Do you ever regret protecting someone?" His gaze darkened, quiet. After a long pause, he said, "My mother." I froze. "My father was a monster," he continued, voice roughened by memory. "I was 12 when I heard the gunshot. He killed her because she tried to leave. Since that night, I swore no man would ever do that to a woman again. But that vow turned me into something else, cold, ruthless. To protect, I had to become worse than the men I despised. I couldn't speak. In that moment, I saw him, not the powerful Devlin everyone feared, but the boy who had once lost everything. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He looked at me, the steel in his eyes softening. "Don't be, I didn't tell you for pity." A beat passed. "Maybe because you remind me I was once human." The words hung between us, fragile as glass. The clock ticked softly, marking the distance between two heartbeats that refused to meet. "You shouldn't say that," I murmured, though my voice trembled. "Perhaps," he said, a ghost of a smile tracing his lips, "but I already did." I looked down at the emerald ring catching the lamplight. Every word he'd spoken burned softly in my chest. I didn't know if it was fear or something far more dangerous. When I finally left his office, my pulse hadn't slowed. It wasn't terror anymore. It was something alive, uninvited, and real. And I knew then that the man behind the armor wasn't just a hunter. He was a survivor who'd built a golden cage around both of us. The days after that night passed quietly. Devlin Manor fell back into rhythm, calm mornings, short dinners, polite silence. Yet something had changed. I caught Dante watching me more often, his gaze less like a command and more like a quiet concern he refused to name. That night, rain returned to Boston. Thunder rolled somewhere far away, and the vast house seemed to shrink under it. I'd just laid Noah in his crib when the storm began to beat against the glass, steady, soothing, almost peaceful. Then I heard it, a faint sound, soft but wrong. Something sliding against the outer hall window. I froze, listening. Maybe it was the wind, but instinct told me otherwise. I stepped to the door, opened it slightly. The hallway was dark, silver light from the sconces, painting cold reflections on the marble. Nothing moved, yet the sense of being watched prickled at the back of my neck. I turned to go back, and a click echoed down the corridor. The far door creaked open. A draft swept through. I stiffened, clutched Noah close. "Lucian?" I whispered. No reply. I reached for my phone. Dead. Power out. The entire manor swallowed by darkness. Then a shadow moved at the end of the hall. Quick, fluid, too human to be wind. My breath caught. I backed into the room, clutching my child. The door burst open. I gasped, then saw him. Dante. White shirt open at the collar, gun in hand, eyes cold enough to still the storm outside. "There's someone here," I breathed. "I know." His voice was calm, lethal. "Hold the baby. Don't move from the wall." He stepped into the hall, silent as a predator. Lightning flashed through the windows, outlining his figure, the gun glinting silver. A crash sounded somewhere down the corridor. Dante ran toward it. Footsteps, a shout, then silence. Moments later, Lucian appeared with 2 guards, weapons drawn. "West Wing breach," he said. "1 down, 2 fled." "Lock every entrance," Dante ordered. "No one in or out." His gaze snapped to me. I'd never seen that look, fury tangled with fear. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. He tried to get into Noah's room. He crossed the space in 2 strides, a hand settling on my shoulder, cold, steady. "From now on, you and the boy stay in my room." "That's not necessary. Not a request." His tone left no argument. "This doesn't happen twice." Lucian handed him a small cloth bag. Dante opened it, his expression hardening. "Tracking tag," he muttered. "Someone inside gave our location." The air turned heavy. I realized what terrified me wasn't the intruder. It was the storm gathering behind Dante's eyes. A moment later, he said, "Pack what you need. We're moving now." His private quarters were on the 3rd floor, east wing, secured, silent, overlooking the lake. Warm light spilled over dark wood and glass. I laid Noah in a smaller crib near the bed, heart still racing but strangely calm. When I turned, Dante stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, clipped, dangerous. "Double the patrols. I want the leak found by sunrise." He hung up, but the tension stayed. "You're all right?" I nodded, voice shaking. "I didn't think anyone could reach us here." "We don't know who he was," he said, stepping closer. "But I know one thing, he won't leave this city alive." I looked up, meeting his gaze. The distance between us vanished. "No one touches you or your son," he said quietly. "Ever." Lightning flashed, carving his face from the dark. His eyes no longer belonged to a hunter. They belonged to a man who would kill to protect. And for the first time, I believed him. If anyone crossed that threshold tonight, they would not walk back out. That night, the rain hadn't stopped. Lightning swept across the lake, throwing pale light over the glass walls. Noah slept soundly in his crib, his tiny breaths soft in the dark. I couldn't sleep. Dante's words kept circling in my head. "He won't leave this city alive." The sentence echoed like a threat and a promise all at once. The door opened quietly. Dante stepped in, shirt still damp from the storm, gun in hand. He set it on the table, unbuttoning his cuffs. The lamplight caught the sharp planes of his face, cold, tired, unreadable. "Did I wake you?" I asked softly. "No," he said. "I wasn't asleep." He paused. "Are you afraid of me, Elena?" I didn't answer. The silence between us said enough. "You think I'll kill him," he said. "You will, won't you?" Dante poured wine. The liquid shimmered red in the glass, catching the light like blood. "When someone threatens what's mine, I end them." "Not that way, Dante." My voice trembled. "You can't kill him. I can't let you." His eyes lifted, steel gray and sharp. "He almost killed you and your son. If you kill him, you become him," I said, stepping closer. "Please, don't. Not for me. Do it for yourself." The silence tightened until it hurt. Then finally he set the glass down. "No blood," he said slowly. "I promise. No blood, only justice." I exhaled, barely believing it. "You promise?" "I don't promise often," he said, "but when I do, I keep it." I sat down, trembling. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me." So I did. Everything. The apartment, the drunken nights, the words that cut deeper than bruises, the shove that sent me tumbling down the stairs while I was pregnant, the sound of something breaking, bone, heart, I couldn't tell. The rain that night, the cab driver who wouldn't look me in the eyes, the doctor saying, "You're lucky, a little more, and the baby wouldn't have made it." When I finished, the room was silent except for the rain. Dante stood still, his hand clenched so tight, his knuckles turned white. "I should have killed him long ago," he murmured, voice tight with restraint. Tears stung my eyes. "If you do that, I'll lose you, and Noah will lose the only man who's ever protected him." He looked at me, something raw flickering beneath the fury. "You think I need saving?" "I think we both do." The candle flame flickered as a draft slipped through the room. I stepped closer, my hand brushing his. His skin was cold, trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything he carried. "I'm not just afraid of him," I whispered. "I'm afraid of what I could become." There were nights I wished I could kill him myself. But then I'd look at Noah and realize, if I did, a part of him would live inside me forever. Dante lowered his head, eyes shadowed. "You're stronger than I thought." "I'm just tired." After a long pause, he asked, "Is there anything I can use to destroy him without a bullet?" I hesitated, then nodded. "There is. I have what he fears most, the truth." His gaze sharpened. "Go on." "Grant embezzled funds from the hospital's charity program," I said. "He used them to buy shares and covered it up with fake audits. I have copies, files, signed transfers, everything. They're locked in a safety deposit box at Beacon Bank. If it's made public, he'll lose everything: his career, his license, his father's protection." Dante went still. Then slowly he said, "You've kept this all along?" "I never meant to use it. I just wanted to run." He stepped closer, his voice low, steady, dangerous in its calm. "Elena, give it to me. We'll end this, once and for all." I looked up at him. In the flicker of the candlelight, his face looked both human and unyielding. A man carved from pain and purpose. I nodded, barely a whisper. "All right," I said, "let's end it." But somewhere deep inside, I knew, when this ended, nothing between us would ever be the same. The morning after that night, Boston's sky was so blue it seemed freshly washed with cold water. Clouds drifted lazily, the wind was light, and the lake outside the manor lay perfectly still, like a massive mirror reflecting the trembling trees. Everything was so calm it felt unreal, but I knew that peace was only a thin layer, covering something burning beneath. Dante sat at the head of the table, the early light cutting across his dark hair and glinting off the steel rim of his coffee cup. He was on the phone, his voice low and firm. The car at 10, Beacon Bank. No tales. Lucian stood nearby and nodded quietly. I knew at once today would change everything. I put on a gray coat, tied my hair back, trying to hide the slight tremor in my hands. Dante glanced over, his gaze pausing on my wrist, on the thin silver bracelet that still gleamed under the morning sun. The one he had given me weeks ago, the one I hadn't yet dared to take off. His voice softened, rare and quiet. Don't be afraid, we're only taking back what's already yours. The Bentley slid down the tree-lined road. Through the window, I watched Boston move through its own life. Strangers crossing streets, lights flickering in windows, the faint hum of traffic. No one knew that inside this silent black car sat two people holding something that could burn an empire to ash. I held the folder tightly against my lap, unease pressing against my ribs. If Grant finds out we have the evidence, he won't stay still. Dante didn't turn, the sunlight reflected in his gray eyes. Good, he said. The closer he comes, the easier he'll drown. His words made me shiver, yet beneath that chill, something in me trusted him completely, blindly. Beacon Bank stood among the old brick buildings of Beacon Hill. The air inside the underground vault smelled of steel and perfume. The clerk recognized Dante immediately, her voice almost reverent. Mr. Devlin, room 37B is ready. The metal door opened, light bouncing off the rows of safe boxes lined up like silent sentinels. My hands were damp with sweat as I turned the key. Inside lay a single brown envelope. I handed it to Dante, my palm cold. He opened it and flipped through the pages, ledgers, invoices, transfer records. Each sheet made a soft slicing sound, like a blade brushing skin. His face didn't change, but his eyes darkened. Enough to destroy him, he said evenly, but there was a deadly calm in his tone. When we stepped out of the bank, wind from the lake brushed across us, carrying the metallic scent of water. I looked down at the surface. It shimmered faintly, reflecting the pale sky. I saw myself there, the woman who once only knew how to run, now standing beside a man who could make the world kneel, and I knew I had chosen a road with no return. On the drive back, Dante held his phone again, his voice low and precise. Send all the documents to the federal court and the press, anonymous, no traces. When he hung up, I watched his face, half in light, half in shadow. You're really going to destroy him, I murmured. He didn't look at me. No, he said, I'm just letting him burn himself. By late afternoon, the news exploded. Every headline screamed, Dr. Grant Hale accused of embezzling charity funds. Evidence from anonymous source. Photos of him leaving the hospital, face twisted with shock, spread everywhere. Behind him, Richard Hale followed, his expression hard, his eyes already cracking. I sat in the living room, the screen glowing before me, and felt nothing but emptiness. I'd thought I would feel relief, but it was like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you were never afraid of falling, only of what came after. Dante walked in, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Your justice is working, he said calmly. I looked at him, the light from the lamp reflecting in his gray eyes. Your justice, I whispered, is beautiful and terrifying. He took a sip and replied, Justice doesn't have to be beautiful, Elena. It only has to be right. That night, I stepped out onto the balcony. The lake stretched silent beneath the moonlight, the water glinting silver. The wind brushed against my skin, cold but gentle. I thought of Grant, of the years I'd spent locked inside that small house, of the night I fell down the stairs. I had imagined this moment for so long, his fall, his ruin. But now that it had come, all I felt was exhaustion. The door opened softly behind me. Dante stepped out, no jacket, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled. He held a glass of wine, his movements slow, deliberate. "He'll be arrested before dawn," he said quietly. "The press will tear him apart." I didn't look at him. "I should feel free," I said, my voice barely above the wind. "But you don't." "No." I turned, the moonlight catching the glass in his hand. "Justice doesn't heal, does it?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from too much truth. "Justice is never gentle. It only leaves emptiness." I looked up at him, the light sketching the lines of his face, hard but touched by something fragile. "And you, Dante, what do you see when you look at this world?" He was silent for a long time before answering, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I see fire beneath this lake." I understood instantly. He wasn't talking about the water. He was talking about himself, and maybe about me. The fire of wounds, of anger, of love held too tightly to breathe. I stood still, feeling the warmth radiating from him, the man I didn't know whether to fear or to need. "It's over now, isn't it?" I asked, barely breathing. Dante looked at me, his eyes deep and still, as though he could see straight through me, through the still waters below. "No," he said slowly, "it's just beginning." The wind rose, rippling the lake. Moonlight shattered into sparks across the waves, each one glinting like a tiny flame. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. Beneath the calm surface of our lives, the fire had already begun to burn. Dawn came quietly. The first light spilled through the glass, catching the faint mist hovering above the lake. The world outside was exploding with headlines, but inside Devlin Manor, silence lingered like the echo of a storm. I sat by the window, watching drops of dew slide down the glass, unsure if what I felt was relief or fear. Grant had lost everything, his reputation, his career, the mask of power he once used to cage me. But what made me tremble wasn't his fall. It was Dante's stillness afterward. Since the news broke, he had barely spoken. For 2 days, he hadn't left the estate, taking only a few brief calls no one was allowed to overhear. I saw him that afternoon in the glass room, the light falling over his white shirt, the television still murmuring reports he didn't watch. "You're not happy?" I asked softly. "Happy?" He raised an eyebrow slightly. "You think victory makes people happy?" I said nothing, staring at my hands. "I just thought, at least you'd feel lighter." He gave a small, humorless smile. "People only feel light when they believe justice is the end. I know better. It's only the beginning." "The beginning of what?" "Of the price we pay," he said, gaze drifting beyond the water. "Nothing won without cost. I learned that long ago. In this world, if you're not strong enough, you're crushed. I protect, in the only way I know, through strength. But strength is lonely," I whispered. His eyes flicked back to mine, as if he'd just seen something he'd spent years trying to forget. "You think I'm lonely?" "I know you are." Silence thickened between us. I could hear my own heartbeat ticking with the clock. I had feared this man once, his power, his control. But now all I saw was quiet sorrow, the kind carried by someone who had borne too much for too long. "You can't protect everything forever, Dante," I said, my voice unsteady. "Not with guns, not with power." He rose, stepping closer until there were only a few breaths between us. "Then how, Elena?" "With trust." He gave a small, hollow laugh. "Trust is the most expensive thing I've ever known." "Maybe, but I'm trusting you now." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Not a confession, but a truth. His eyes flickered. His hand tightened around the glass before setting it down. Then he took another step, his breath brushing my skin. "Elena," he murmured, "don't trust the devil." "I don't see a devil," I said softly. "I see a man who forgot he had a heart." He froze. For a moment, something fragile crossed his face, as if my words had cracked a door he'd sealed long ago. The world around us seemed to fade until only breath and heartbeat remained, and the faint sound of rain outside touching the lake. Dante lifted a hand to my face, slow, careful, as if he might break something precious. "You're not afraid of me?" "I am," I whispered, "but I'm still here." He leaned in and I didn't move away. The kiss came like a small fracture in stone, warm, real, trembling with emotion. There was no hunger, only the quiet meeting of two souls that had lost too much. When he pulled back, his eyes stayed close to mine, his breath soft against my lips. "You shouldn't trust me," he murmured. "I don't need a reason to," I breathed. We stayed silent for a long time. The afternoon light spilled into the room, painting everything gold. Outside, the lake remained still, pretending nothing had changed, but I knew something had. Dante turned back to the table, picking up the remaining files. "We've won, but the war isn't over," he said. "I know." "Then promise me this, Elena. If we have to fight again, we'll do it your way, smart, not cruel." I looked at him. The steel in his eyes had softened into something else, light. I nodded. "I promise, but you have to promise too, not to lose yourself again." He smiled faintly. "A pact of two souls," he said. Outside, sunlight brushed the lake, breaking into ripples of soft gold that looked like fire underwater. I realized then that the fire between us no longer destroyed, it warmed. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt peace within that fire itself. After that pact, the atmosphere in Devlin Manor changed. In the following days, everything moved fast and quiet, as if the world outside was waiting for another grand performance. Dante said little, but I could tell he was preparing for something larger than revenge, a declaration. And that night arrived. Light flooded the gardens behind the manor, where a grand stage had been set beneath sweeping white drapes. Under hundreds of crystal lights, guests arrived, businessmen, politicians, journalists. Everyone knew this was more than an engagement party. It was Dante Devlin's display of power. From the second floor, I looked down at the glowing courtyard. Music swelled, laughter mingled with clinking glasses, and in the mirror I saw myself, an emerald green gown that caught the light like water, the back open just enough to draw stares. Around my neck, the emerald pendant he'd chosen shimmered like a captured flame. Noah ran toward me in his tiny tuxedo, hair neatly combed. "Mom, do I look handsome?" he asked, eyes bright. I smiled, straightened his bow tie. "The most handsome. Remember, today is special. For me and for Dante." Dante appeared behind me, dressed in black, the open collar softening his otherwise sharp presence. When he lifted Noah into his arms, I caught a flicker of tenderness in him, something no one else ever saw. "Ready," he asked. I nodded. The celebration began. We stepped onto the grand stairs together, Noah in his arms. 100 cameras turned toward us. Lights, applause, flashes, the chaos of admiration. Someone called, "Smile," and we did. One perfect image captured, a happy Devlin family, spread across every screen within hours. But no one knew that while those pictures spread, shadows were already creeping into the light. In the middle of the toast, a strange hush rippled through the crowd. I turned and my chest tightened. Richard Hale and his wife, Clara Hale, had entered, uninvited. Their faces wore polite masks, but their eyes were knives. Dante barely glanced at them before murmuring to Lucian, "Keep the guests calm." Then, to me, under his breath, "Stay here, I'll handle this." I nodded, my pulse racing. I knew this night was not just about love, it was war dressed in silk. He led Richard down the corridor to the study, where the lights were dim, gold glinting off the mahogany shelves. The door closed. I couldn't see inside, but I could hear, their voices low, sharp, cutting through the silence like blades. "You came uninvited," Dante said, his tone low and cool. How should I interpret that? Richard's voice was gravel. "I came for my son. You've destroyed him, and I want to know, how much is enough for you?" "Enough?" Dante gave a quiet laugh, swirling his glass. "I merely showed the world who he really is. I didn't invent anything." "You fight dirty, Devlin. You used the press, the courts, and that woman to pull me down." "No," Dante said, setting his glass down, eyes sharp as steel. "You pulled yourself down when you protected a man who should have rotted in prison years ago." Richard's fist clenched. "What do you want?" "Simple," Dante replied. He opened the drawer, placed a thick file bound in leather on the desk. Inside is every record of Grant's embezzlement, along with copies bearing your signature. If I release them, you lose everything. But I don't want money. I want a promise." Richard stared, torn between rage and fear. "A promise?" "That from this moment on, the Hale family will never touch Elena, or anyone carrying the Devlin name, not even with a word." The room fell still. The ticking of the clock filled the silence. Richard drew a long breath, his hand trembling. "You don't understand. This world doesn't run on morality." Dante smiled faintly. "I know, it runs on fear, and tonight you'll fear me." They locked eyes for a long, dangerous beat. Then Richard lowered his head. "I understand." He emptied his glass in one swallow, then left, his face pale, shoulders heavy. I stood near the staircase, the soft light spilling across the marble. When Dante emerged, his eyes met mine. He didn't speak, just gave a small nod. I knew then the war was over, at least for now. We returned to the party. Guests laughed, toasted, congratulated, called our names under the glittering chandeliers. And as his hand rested gently on my back, I realized our smiles, his and mine, were the most beautiful lies of the night. The morning after the party, Boston lay under a thin veil of mist. Pale sunlight slipped through the curtains, glinting off half-empty glasses left on the table. No more music, no more laughter, only the silence that follows things that have ended. I walked downstairs barefoot, the cold marble underfoot, grounding me as last night's echoes lingered. Cheers, lights, the hollow smiles of those who didn't yet know they'd lost. In the living room, Dante sat waiting, white shirt sleeves rolled, the open collar soft against the line of his jaw. Morning light framed his face, calm and strangely peaceful. Before him lay a thick envelope, sealed and untouched. When I approached, he lifted his gaze, gray eyes steady as a still lake. "Richard Hale sent someone," he said quietly. "He signed everything. Grant's being transferred to London, license revoked in the US, and—" He paused, choosing his words. "He's renounced his parental rights to Noah." I froze. The words hit clearly, but it took a few seconds for them to sink in. Then my whole body began to tremble, as if someone had finally unfastened the chains I'd worn for years. I took one step back, then another, pressing a hand to my chest as my breath broke apart. He really signed it?" Dante nodded. "They had no choice." I sat down, tears spilling silently. Not sobs, just quiet drops, falling like rain against glass. I'd imagined this moment countless times, but never thought it would arrive in such stillness. No arguments, no threats, just ink on paper, and the chains were gone. Dante said nothing. He rose, crossed to me, and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. The warmth of that touch only made the tears fall faster. "Elena," he said softly, "no one can ever touch you again." I looked up at him. In the soft light, he no longer seemed like the cold man I once feared, but someone who carried both strength and tenderness in his gaze. I smiled faintly through the tears. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. We just broke what should never have existed." I turned toward the window. The lake shimmered faintly in the distance, its surface calm as breath. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. No one could threaten me or Noah again. No more nights waking in fear of footsteps that weren't there. "And the engagement?" I asked softly. "What will we tell them?" Dante was quiet for a moment before answering. "We'll tell the truth, that it's over." I lowered my head. "And after that?" "After that," he said, his voice low, steady, "we go our separate ways." I thought I was ready to hear that. But when he said it, my chest still tightened. I met his eyes, forcing a smile. So it was all just a performance, wasn't it? He held my gaze for a long time, then said quietly, "Yes, but sometimes when you play a part too long, you forget what was pretend." We stood there in silence. The curtains shifted in the morning breeze, carrying the scent of wet grass. I wanted to say something, but my throat closed. Dante turned first, heading toward the door. "Lucian will take you and Noah to the new house," he said. "It's safer if you want it. Everything's ready." I nodded, though my heart shrank. "And you?" "I still have work to do." I didn't ask what kind. Some questions only widened the distance. As he walked toward the light, his shadow stretched long across the floor. "Dante," I called softly. He stopped, turned. I met his eyes. "Thank you, not just for justice, for reminding me I could still trust someone." He didn't answer, only nodded once, then left. The door closed behind him. The sound was small but final. Yet inside me, it felt less like an ending than an opening. I wiped my tears and looked toward the lake. The sun had climbed higher, scattering gold across the surface, free, bright, untethered. Though our pretend relationship had ended, I knew something real remained. Something wordless, burning quietly beneath the calm water. And I understood then, one day, that fire would find its way back to the surface. That night, Boston lay under the wind. After all the noise, Devlin Manor had returned to its original silence. Only the faint lapping of the lake and the moonlight spilling through the glass. I couldn't sleep. Noah was fast asleep, but I sat out on the balcony, wrapped in a thin shawl, watching the light shimmer across the water. There was something in the air, not peace but a quiet ache, like words waiting to be spoken. The door opened behind me. Dante's footsteps were slow, steady, deliberate. He said nothing, just leaned against the railing beside me. The moonlight traced silver through his dark hair. The faint scent of smoke drifted in the breeze. "I thought you went to bed," I said softly. "I thought you did," he replied, his voice low, rough with fatigue. "But it seems neither of us is done with what tonight left behind." I turned to him. The moon carved shadows across his face, half light, half dark, both near and far. "What are you thinking about?" "Something I shouldn't," he said with a quiet laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "I used to believe every relationship was a transaction, until you." The wind lifted a strand of my hair. "And now?" "Now I know," he said slowly. "Some things can't be bought, and they can't be faked." I looked down at my hands. "We've worn our masks too long, Dante. So long I forgot who I was beneath them." He turned toward me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "So have I. I've worn mine so long I'm not sure the man underneath deserves anyone." I fell silent. A part of me wanted to look away, but couldn't, because in his eyes I saw myself, tired, raw, but real. He took a step closer, voice dropping. "Elena, I don't know when this stopped being a part I was playing, but if you need the truth, here it is. I care about you, not as a pretense, not as a bargain, just you." I stood still. The wind stirred the curtains, the scent of jasmine curling in the air. His words were simple, without performance, without plea, and they made my heart race. I didn't look at him when I whispered, "I'm scared, Dante. I've lost too much. Every time I trust someone, it ends badly. And yet you still trust me." "I don't know," I breathed, "but I want to." Dante stepped closer, moonlight spilling across his shoulders. "I can't promise I'll never hurt you," he said softly, "but I can promise you'll never have to be afraid again." I looked up, meeting his gaze. The distance vanished. Two hearts, both once shattered, finding each other in the quiet. He lifted his hand, brushed my cheek with his fingertips, cool, a trembling. "I've lived too long in darkness," he said. "But with you, I remember what light looks like." I smiled through tears I hadn't realized were falling. And I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, until you looked at me. We stood there, silent, the wind and the moon our only witnesses. Dante leaned in. His kiss was soft, unhurried, honest, a confession made without words. When he pulled back, our breaths mingled in the night air. "We began with a lie," I whispered, "but I don't want to end with one." "Then don't," he said, his voice like a breeze. "Let's start again. No lies, no deals, just us." I nodded. No promises, no names, only the feeling that, for once, everything was real. Below us, the lake caught the moonlight, shimmering like 1,000 tiny flames. And in that moment, I knew the last mask had finally fallen. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the glass, brushing softly against the white curtains. No more rain, no more wind, only the faint scent of fresh coffee filling the air. Noah sat on the cream rug in the living room, stacking wooden blocks into crooked towers, humming to himself. Every sound he made felt like a miracle, because it was no longer shadowed by fear. I stood in the kitchen, pouring water, as the morning light touched my bare wrist, where the thin silver bracelet still gleamed. The dining table was the same long oak one I'd once scrubbed spotless on my first day here. the table I never dared to sit at. Now I set 2 cups of coffee, a plate of fruit, and warm pastries upon it. Every gesture was simple, but my heart trembled because it was real. Footsteps came behind me. Dante entered, white shirt, newspaper in hand. Morning light traced the sharp lines of his face, no longer cold, only calm. He paused by the doorway, looking first at me, then at Noah. A faint smile crossed his lips, not joy exactly, but peace. "I can't remember the last time this house was this quiet," he said. I turned, smiling. "Probably before I came." "No," he replied, stepping closer, voice low. "Before I knew what it meant to have someone stay." I didn't answer. Dante set the paper down and joined Noah on the floor. He helped him rebuild a toppled tower, his large hand steadying the small one. Morning light spilled over them both. The sight caught in my throat, not from sudden emotion, but from the quiet realization that every loss, every scar, every night of fear had led us here. I sat beside them. Noah looked up, holding a block. "Dad, does it go here?" The word Dad slipped out so naturally the room seemed to still. I looked at Dante. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled, a soft, honest smile. "Yes, Noah, it goes there." The sunlight touched them both, 2 lives I once thought could never share the same space, now sitting side by side, rebuilding something whole. I watched for a long time, feeling time itself pause, until nothing existed but peace. Dante turned to me, his eyes meeting mine. No command, no distance, just warmth and something fragile. "I used to think I was born for darkness," he said quietly. "But maybe the light was just waiting for someone to knock." I smiled, eyes stinging. "And you opened the door." He shook his head lightly. "No, you kicked it down." We both laughed. The sound wasn't loud, but it filled the house that had always felt too big, too empty. I poured another cup of coffee, the scent mixing with the smell of pastries and sunlight and wood. When Noah ran out into the garden, his laughter carried through the breeze. I stood by the window, watching, catching my reflection in the glass. I no longer saw the frightened woman who once hid from the world, but a mother, someone who had survived, who had dared to love again. Dante came to stand beside me. He didn't speak. He just looked out with me, toward the child playing in the light. In his eyes, I saw what I felt in myself, gratitude. Not for forgiveness, but for another morning. The house was quiet in the best way. The sun spilled across the wooden floor, the wind stirred the trees, and everything felt soft. I closed my eyes, letting the memories return. The day I first arrived with a torn suitcase and a broken heart. The nights of silence, the fear, the man I once thought a monster. Every image returned, but none of it hurt anymore. When I opened my eyes, I looked at the dining table, 2 steaming cups, half-eaten pastries, Noah's laughter outside, Dante standing beside me, and I knew this was family in the simplest, truest way.